I love Loom, man. That's
Loom,
such a great
yeah.
tool.
Yeah, I discovered it yeah, like beginning of last year, and I did the free version, for the longest time, where I think you give it like
Mhm.
25 videos, and then I immediately was like, no, I'm just gonna pay for it because it is
Mhm.
so worth, what it does and
Yeah.
everything. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Do you
Um,
you just use did you say you use the free version or do you use the paid version?
I use the paid version now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because
Yeah. I've
the
I've just only had the free version so far and it's been fine. Like usually I'll use it just like if somebody has a question and I'm like, let me get back to you on that, but I also want to give a little bit deeper explanation, especially a visual explanation. Like I can
Mhm.
go into a client's account and be like, okay, so look at this. So this is this here, or this is how you open it, or you go and click this. Actually, I probably should expand on that as part of like my onboarding process to have some
Mhm.
sort of general explainer videos. Um, I just I feel like it's so much more helpful.
Yeah, it really is. And that's kind of what I've started doing. Like that video that I just sent you, I actually made that originally for Matt Gleb when I had him on. And
Hmm.
I was like, oh yeah, like as long as I don't say somebody's name at the beginning, you can take it and share it with the next
Yep.
guy, you know?
Yep.
So yeah. So I need to do more with it, like you're saying, but I have a lot of I say a lot. I have a handful of them that I've made, and so whenever
Mhm.
a client or something happens, I'm just like, oh, I've got this video. Check it out. It's
Right. Like
it's
talk
pretty
about
great.
efficiency of your time too. Right when the
Yeah,
same issue comes up, you just
yeah,
here it is. This is how
and
to do
that,
it.
that's the other reason I went ahead and upgraded to the paid version because you don't have the. I kept running into the 25 video limit, and so I'd go and like delete old ones, and I was like, yeah, okay. And you have the 5 minute limit too, which sometimes I need to go a little bit longer. So
Right.
yeah, it's worth it. Now Dropbox just came out with something, and because I've had Dropbox, like been paying for Dropbox for years, and they just came out with like an equivalent to it called
Mm.
Capture. um, it's basically the exact same thing, but I don't know. There's something about the interface that's not quite doing it for me. Because I'm
Mm.
like, well, I'm already paying for Dropbox. I could drop Loom, but I don't know. Loom just seems to do it still better. The nice thing about the Dropbox one is you can like create gifs, whatever they're called. So you can like do a little screen recording. Obviously it's not going to do audio, but it's going to generate just a little gif that you can send, and then somebody can watch. I mean, it's good for like a short, like, oh,
Yeah.
20-30 second quick. So that's
Yeah.
another one
That's
that's out there.
Loom
So if
does
you're
that or Dropbox does that.
Dropbox, I don't think Loom does that, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they, because I mean, I don't. I'm like, is Loom gonna sue Dropbox because it literally is just a straight rip off. Like even the way it
Yeah.
lays out and the interface and everything. So I'm sure they'll just
Yeah.
steal features from each other. But if
I
you're
also feel
already
like
paying, what's that?
I was just gonna say I feel like it'd be hard to trademark screen recording though.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm more looking at it from the angle of, like I said, the layout, the interface, like it
Yeah.
looks very similar, but yeah, I mean how it's screen recording, I mean, I used to use just QuickTime built into the Mac for the longest time to do screen recordings before I
Oh,
discovered Loom.
yeah, I
Um
didn't realize that was a thing.
yeah, yeah, but Loom lets you, add the little thumbnail of your face and the camera in the bottom. And I just like how
Yeah.
it's in real time, basically uploading it. And so within seconds of finishing, depending on your internet speed, it's just ready to go. So, and the
Hmm.
transcript feature, that's another reason I paid for it. It'll transcribe the audio and the video. And so if
Um,
somebody, it automatically generates the subtitles. And if somebody, because what I'll do sometimes is some people, it depends, because some people are like, they like the video, and then some people are like, I don't want to watch a video. I'm not in a place where I can, watch it, listen to it right now. So sometimes I'll just send over the video and then I'll paste the transcript in the email too and be like, hey, here's a rough transcript if you don't have time to watch this right now.
yeah.
And that seems to help. Or you paste the transcript in Chat GPT and it cleans it up and makes it all like actual like not looking like a rough transcript. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Have you used that a good bit for your purposes?
it's one of those things where I can think of applications for it, but I just never I just have to remind myself like, oh, it's there. And I feel like anytime I get on it, it's down, it's like down half the time. Of course, now you can pay like $20 a month, basically just paying for it to never go down. Like you get like priority access and some other features and stuff. So, I mean,
sure
the free version is still out there, but yeah.
Yeah, like I'm sure there's ways I could probably use it, but it almost feels like a chore to try to think of something for it to do for me other than just playing around with it,
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I know you and I have talked about how you want to do more with like your blog and writing before. I mean, you can just tell it like, hey, give me a 500-word blog post about whatever the stock market. That's probably too broad, and but it'll generate it. And then you can even say
like, could I feed into it like audio from my podcasts? Is that an option?
So that's like I said, if you have something that'll transcribe it, like Loom, which will, like I said, so yeah. Another thing I've done is, and I've only done this a handful of times. I went to a video that I made, like a shorter video, copied the transcript, fed it to Chat GPT, and said, "Hey, turn this into a blog post that's 1,000 words," and it spits it out. And then I take it and I paste it on, as a blog post on my website. Now, the issue with that is that Google is already getting programmed the algorithms to check and detect. Like you can, like a machine can detect if a machine wrote it, basically. And so, if I'm sure that like in the near future, we'll get away with it, but eventually it's going to get to where basically I'm sure Google will say, okay, if a real person didn't write this, we're not going to give you the search results you're looking for, which, okay, that kind of keeps everything human and fair and whatever. But there's a lot of applications for it. Like I mean, it's scary on one hand, but it's really interesting on the other.
Well, like I think it's BuzzFeed. They've already been doing a ton of articles that are just AI generated,
Yeah.
like and not like publicly broadcasting it like, hey, we're doing AI generate, but it's also not like a big secret either. It's not like they're like trying to, oh no, shh.
Yeah. Well, because that's the thing. Like I don't know. Like people are trying to make it out to be an ethical thing, but I'm like, well, you're not plagiarizing because it's a machine. Like you're just, you know what I'm saying? Like it's not your original work necessarily. But like when it, for example, like I said, if I take a video that I did or a podcast episode, have it just take the transcript and just have it cleaned up. That's my original work. They're just like the machine is just cleaning it up for me. And I don't know. Like again, it is definitely interesting, a new interesting world of tech that we're entering into.
Yeah, I mean it's scary in a lot of ways. Like I think the thing that for me right now is the even scarier one is like deepfake technology.
Yes,
like the ability to take like a Joe Rogan or Joe Biden or just like any person you want and make it seem like they're saying whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you, and like, especially like in politics, like this upcoming presidential election, like, are we going to see something like that? Are we going to see some kind of like deep fake video where it shows a candidate saying something like really like off base and you're like, wait a second,
Yeah.
Or conversely, can that just be the excuse? No, that's a deep fake. That's just generated, that's not real. And it just, whatever you want to believe, you'll just believe about it. If you don't like the person, you'd be like, no, it's real. If you like the person, you'd be like, oh, it's obviously fake.
Yeah. I mean, we are within years of it being unrecognizable, because like now, the deep fake stuff, like you can still kind of tell, but I mean, it's getting freakishly close. There's this account that pops up on Instagram every once in a while, and all that they do is they take Arnold Schwarzenegger's face and voice and they impose it onto the faces and voices of like popular movie scenes. So like
Yes.
they did it with like on Titanic. Like I just saw one with Titanic and whatever, and like it's the girl. So she's like all the like, you know, flirting with Leonardo DiCaprio and all this stuff. And but it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's so disturbing, but it's hilarious. And so and it does like it, like you obviously know it's not real, but it looks
Right.
very real. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is crazy stuff. But well, hey, you sent over this survey report from the
Mhm.
survey you did. So
Yeah.
I've kind of skimmed it over, but man, if you want to kind of just kind of take it away and kind of maybe just start the conversation about this, and then you know
Yeah.
I'll just kind of ask questions, and we'll just do like we've done. Well, and welcome back. It's
Yeah.
been a while. It's been
Yeah.
this is your annual podcast appearance. So
Yeah. Well, although I'm trying to think, I mean, I didn't actually go back and look. I don't even know if I made a 2022 appearance. So maybe I was put on timeout for a little while,
oh,
put on
maybe
probation.
no. I feel like you did. I feel like you did. I feel like
Maybe, maybe.
it's always around this time. It's always somewhere between
Yeah.
like
So maybe it was early
January and March.
2022. Maybe that's why it feels a long time ago.
Man, well,
Yeah.
you know what? I'll get you back on here as often as you want to come. I mean, you're welcome anytime. So there's that open
I
invitation.
appreciate it.
But no, so here is the premise of your you did this survey and you kind of generated this report based off of this. And by the way, is this available anywhere on your website? Or I mean, like, as I can throw a link to the show notes or whatever if you want to make this available.
Yeah, I'm happy to make this available. I put it out there a while back, so you'd have to scroll pretty far back in my Facebook feed to find the link to get it. But yeah, I'll provide a link. You can put it in the show notes, and if people want to download this. So like, yeah, the premise behind it was a financial pathway, which is my business, and I do investment management and financial planning. Just by default, I was working with a lot of pastors, a lot of ministry leaders, because you know my dad's pastor, and I went to Bible college, and it's a lot of people that I know and a lot of people that know me. So it wasn't purposeful. It wasn't like I'm going to be a financial planner for pastors and ministry leaders, but that's who my message was resonating a lot with, and that's who I have connections with. So I thought I really need to do some due diligence and understand very carefully, like take a very close look at what are the unique financial challenges that are facing pastors, particularly ministry leaders in general. Maybe you're not a pastor, but maybe Christian school principal, maybe a missionary, like just, you know, within Christian ministry, generally speaking. And I feel like, you know, especially in this world that I'm in financial planning, it's so broad. Like there's so many different possible things that people are facing, different scenarios. It's hard to be a generalist when it comes to financial advice. It just really is. And I think more and more what we're seeing in our world is people that want to be excellent in the advice and planning that they give probably should have a specialty, probably should have an area of expertise, because not only does that make it more efficient for your client, but it also makes it more efficient for you. If most of the questions and issues that I'm facing are common, then I really become the subject matter expert. And then for the person that I'm working with, it makes it so much easier for them, because instead of me constantly having to say, well, you know, actually, I don't really know. I've never run into that. Let me do some research. Let me try to find out about that for you. No, I already know. Well, here it is. This is the rule. This is what it is for housing allowance. This is what it is for, you know, 403Bs or whatever the issue happens to be. But I just wanted to know a little bit more emotionally, a little bit more of the thought process behind all of this, not just the numbers and figures. So I did dozens of interviews. I sent out a bunch of surveys to mostly pastors, but just several different ministry leaders in different roles. And I asked them the same questions. And I just really kind of tried to get down to this. What are the unique financial challenges that pastors face? And just a little bit of background on this, Luke. For probably most of the people listening know my dad, Kurt Skelly. And you may not really know.
A few people know of him. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how broad, or you know, I just know a lot of people that you know and I know, you know my dad.
Yeah.
And so but maybe not everybody kind of knows Kurt Skelly before he had a very public ministry and you know, spoke at conferences and that sort of thing. He grew up in Connecticut, after Bible college, he moved to Connecticut, worked at a church there. So he was the youth pastor. He was teaching in the Christian school. He planted a church. Like, this is all simultaneously now. These are not like at different points at the same time. Youth pastor, Christian school teacher, church planter. So he would go on Sunday afternoons and go up to Enfield, Connecticut, and do afternoon services there. He worked at the car rental agency on Saturday. One night a week, he would work at a care home facility. We had three. It was me and my two brothers at the time, so 3 kids. And he was just doing all of these things. He made $15,000 a year.
Wow. Like accumulatively from all of those different side jobs?
It was 15. I $15,000 a year. Like, now, I mean, this is back in early 1990s.
Yeah.
So I mean, you adjust for inflation, but like, still, even if you adjust for inflation, that's not a lot
not great.
of money.
Yeah.
And living in Connecticut, pretty expensive area of the country to live in. We were just barely making it by. And as a kid, you don't really know any different. We lived in this small apartment complex, and my dad had a little Toyota that drove around everywhere, and we were fine. And he'll tell you that it wasn't like, oh, boo-hoo, poor me. Like, it was great. We had a wonderful season of life, and he loved what he did. But it was just, that was, I think, the mentality for many, many years in ministry was, you don't, like, money is, you don't think about the money. You just serve God. You just go 100 miles an hour and do everything and trust God to take care of you. And I think that mentality has changed, and I think it's a good thing. Obviously, anybody who's going to be going into ministry for the money, the joke's on you, because that's almost definitely not going to be the case, unless you're Kenneth Copeland or Joel Osteen. Money's not usually that great. But at the same time, there are some very real challenges that came along with that. And I think for a lot of guys in my dad's generation and older, what they were told, maybe explicitly or at least, subconsciously, was, you work, serve God, and you just trust him to provide, and you really don't take any steps on your personal finances. Retirement, what is that? You retire when you're dead. Like, and I think that's actually been very, very detrimental to a lot of pastors and ministry leaders. And I think right now, what we're seeing is a lot of this, my generation is coming into this saying, I'm not going to do the same thing. Because what they're seeing is a lot of older pastors who are 65, 70, 75, even older sometimes, and they literally cannot retire. Like, they can't get out of ministry because they don't have anything. A lot of them opted out of Social Security on top of that. That wasn't even really part of the survey, but so they have nothing. They have literally nothing to fall back on. They haven't saved for retirement. And so they need a paycheck. And so here they are, still working in a church, still pastoring, and they're well beyond their prime. And not only are they struggling, but their churches are struggling. Because it's time for them to move on. It's time to hand over the workload to somebody who's younger and has more energy and more vision and all of that. And so it's collateral damage is what it is. So I talked to pastors, and I asked them questions about their unique personal challenges and just a bunch of different questions. So the results were really interesting. I'm curious, as you read through because it's like 9 or 10 pages. It's not like a book. It's an executive summary. I'm just curious what stood out to you as far as, because I just sent that over to you here.
Last night. So, I mean, I think for me, it's really this premise of the way you describe this of confronting poverty theology, because it contrasts and maybe with the idea of prosperity gospel, and because that's another thing, not to chase that rabbit too far, but you said Joel Osteen and Kenneth Copeland in particular, and that's kind of one of the things that, Kenneth Copeland in particular, that's what he preaches. Big time prosperity gospel preacher, which is, if you are struggling financially, it's because you don't have enough faith, and so I see the poverty theology as the opposite end of that spectrum, kind of like your Calvinism versus Arminianism. Like it's two extreme, viewpoints of God's sovereignty in that case. And this to me seems like two extreme viewpoints of prosperity gospel. Hey, if you believe it, you can have it, you can achieve it, and you'll be wealthy for it. But then poverty theology here, as you put it, of you just don't worry about the money. God will take care of you. You'll be fine. And there's dangers to both, kind of, like I said, sides of that extreme, those extremes rather. So I think for me, it's just, I'm more fascinated with the premise of it. And, like I said, as I've just giving it a quick overview, I can also relate because it's like, I've been here. You and I both at one point served as, I believe, Christian school teachers. I know I did, and I think you did at one time too.
Yep.
And they are, that's kind of the notorious position that's like, yeah, that's definitely entry level. Ministry is already going to be low pay, and Christian school teachers, like I said, that's definitely the entry level position. Yes, yeah, and I do. I mean, I remember, and I'm not blaming anybody. It's just, it was my mindset. I mean, when I entered into full-time ministry when I was 21 years old, I just thought, as long as I can pay my bills and get by, like, I'm not going to worry about, retirement or whatever, because my mindset was, I'll work till I'm dead. And actually, Nate, it was when, several years later, when I had gotten out of ministry, started my own business, and I talked to you, you kind of helped me understand the value of that long-term savings and investment and retirement. Because it finally clicked with me. Obviously there's a lot of components to it, but the part that clicked with it for me was you showed me that, hey, this is the idea of getting your money working for you. Like you're not just putting it in a savings account where you're saving. No, you're investing and it's growing, And so, the idea is like, by the time you are older, if something happens, because some people, as long as they're healthy, they're going to be working, and that's fine. But the idea is that you've got that money working for you. And even if, God forbid, something happened to your health and you can no longer work, you are going to still be provided for. And so anyways, I know that's a very broad answer to the question you asked me there, but getting back to it, like I said, I'm more fascinated with the concept of poverty theology, and then a lot of your findings here on how people see it. And then I really am looking forward to kind of the discussion of like, how do we, I guess, overcome it or see it differently?
Yeah. Well, that title, Confronting Poverty Theology, came after all the research was done. Because I didn't want to say, here's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to have an end in mind. I just literally wanted to hear what the feedback was. I mean, I thought I knew what some of the things people would say would be, but it definitely clarified. And there's some things that maybe I would have listed that I thought pastors would say, and I didn't hear a whole lot. There's some other things that I would have thought wouldn't have been such a big deal, and ended up, I heard it a lot. But the whole idea behind poverty theology to me is, on one end, we see this very unhealthy focus on prosperity theology, this whole thing that like that money and wealth is the proof of God's blessing in your life, which is just not true. I mean, if you're wealthy and you have a lot of money, obviously that's not going to be the case without God, but that's not the proof that you're a good person or that you're living for God just because you happen to have money.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of prosperity theology teachers will tell you is the reason I have a private jet, and the reason I have 45 bathrooms in my mansion, and it's because God's blessing me. It's the proof of the great faith that I have. And I, I'm not going to wade into that whole thing because that's a whole nother discussion. But poverty theology is also a very real thing. It's just not as explicitly taught. It's just more of understood that real Christians, like really committed people, actually not having money, not having wealth or savings or a retirement account or any, and like not having strong financial skills, that's actually showing you how dedicated I am to the Lord.
Yeah.
And if you are wealthy and if you do have a lot saved up for retirement or that, then that must mean that you're more materialistic.
Hmm.
You're less spiritual than I am because I actually have less money than you.
Yeah.
And that's a ridiculous notion too.
Yeah.
And we
And
see both examples in the Bible. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I was going to say, and in a lot of ways, we talk about these prosperity gospel, teachers and preachers and leaders. And, in a way, they almost are preaching both, because they're saying, hey, because they're how they've made their money by and large. I mean, they've maybe sold some books and done some things, but they're convincing people to give to their ministries. And you hear that same, it's kind of ironic. You hear that same language of, if you give and have enough faith, they take the whole, like, God will give back, which again, to some degree is not false, but they, the way they're teaching it is definitely a unhealthy and unbiblical approach to those passages. And so in one way, yes, they're preaching the prosperity gospel, but they're also kind of pulling from some of these, I guess messaging, if you will, from the poverty theology concept, as well as, hey, don't just give it to God, and he'll give back. And I mean, because I've heard these from all different, there's no particular denomination or type of church where this comes from. So I've heard stories from all types of church backgrounds of people that say, yeah, like growing up, my parents, they gave so much to the church, and, the pastor kind of lived a pretty nice, comfortable life, and my parents were always struggling, but yet they always were giving and whatever. So it is interesting how, even though they're two different viewpoints and can be two extremes, how, like I said, the prosperity kind of pulls from a little bit of that poverty theology in order for themselves to prosper. So I don't know. I just kind of made that connection as you were talking there.
Yes. And I think, if I'd grown up in a church where prosperity theology was really rampant, maybe I'd have a totally different viewpoint on this, but that's not what I've seen. My experience has been really the opposite, if anything. So I feel like part of my mission now is to help pastors to confront that poverty theology, to help them to understand, listen, this is not a materialistic or greedy thing. As long as you have the right motivations about it, putting money aside for retirement, saving for emergencies, being financially savvy, understanding insurance, health insurance, life insurance, like all of these things are good. And it's actually being a wise steward. Like that's part of what, I talk about a lot is, understanding what stewardship really is meaning, okay, it's not mine, but it has been placed under my management, so I'm accountable for it.
Yeah.
And God's given us time. He's given us different abilities. He's given us plenty of opportunity because we live in an amazingly free and wealthy society. But he's also given us financial resources, and we've got to make the best of it. So yeah, you may be a pastor, you may be a ministry leader, Christian school teacher, and you don't make a ton of money, but that doesn't absolve you from still trying to make good money decisions. Maybe you can't do as much as this guy over here is an executive at his company, but you still can be smart with your money, and you can still, to the best of your ability, try to make those good money decisions. So that was really my angle with that title.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's kind of move through again. If you want to get this report here, you can, well, like I said, we'll link to it in the show notes so you can access it. And I'm just going to kind of, there's these different challenges that you go over. So, challenge, and we've kind of alluded to some of them, but challenge number one, is when it comes to, this concept of poverty theology and what pastors are struggling with when it comes to their financial stability. That is going to be the below average pay. And you've really got some good numbers here and data. And so, yeah, I'll let you kind of hit the high points of this first challenge.
Yeah, I think this comes as no surprise, especially if you're in ministry. The pay is usually not great. Now, some ministries do a great job, and they really do take care of their folks, and that's great. That's just not the norm. What usually happens is when you go into ministry, you don't usually jump into a senior pastorate role, or at least if you do, it's probably at a pretty small congregation, right? So either you're coming in maybe doing as an associate pastor, a youth pastor, maybe teaching in a Christian school. And those jobs are almost always at a very low end of the pay scale. So usually, so this is the story I've heard over and over again. Um, Went to Bible college, went to seminary, graduated, jumped into the first role in one of those, one of those types of roles, and just really for the next 10 to 15 years, just struggled to keep your head above water.
Mm.
Usually what happens is
Yep.
both husband and wife have to work at first,
Yep.
before kids come into the picture. That, maybe they both teach at the Christian school, or maybe one's in ministry, the other one's, maybe like do a receptionist or secretary, or even works outside the home. But especially if you're both in ministry, those two ministry salaries combined basically add up to one regular salary
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of time. So you're doing okay, but it means both of you have to be, rowing as hard as possible. Then kids come into the picture. So then there's a big regression, because
Mm-hmm.
now there's extra expenses. Then that also means one spouse is either going to drop to part-time or maybe just drop out of work altogether. And it usually is not until, for the guys that I'm talking to, usually it's 35 to 40 that they're finally in a position where maybe they're in a senior pastorate, or they're in a role where they actually are being paid a decent salary for the first time in their life. And I say
Yeah.
decent, not as in like it's a huge salary. It's just like it's a okay
Yeah.
salary.
Yeah.
And now they've just begun to think about trying to save for retirement, and they feel like, man, I'm just behind the eight ball now, because I didn't do anything for the first 15 years of my career, and now I don't know what do I need to do. Am I actually going to be able to retire? Like, how much do I need to do? So these are conversations I'm having all the time. I did I looked up some salary numbers. This is interesting. It's in the report.
Yep.
Average youth pastor salary, this is from PayScale, is just below 40,000
Yeah.
a year for youth pastor. Senior pastor is 50,000
Mm-hmm.
a year. Now that's average. Obviously, if you live in Arkansas, 50,000 is probably okay. If you live in California or Massachusetts, no, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I understand there's a little bit of swing depending on where you're living, but here's what I found interesting. Then I was like, okay, let me just see what some comparable salaries would be. Average elementary teacher makes 48,000.
Yeah. And that would
Um,
be obviously not a Christian school. That would be your public
you're
school
right, public
teacher.
school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So think about that. We're paying senior pastors about the same as we pay our local third grade teacher. Now, I think third grade teachers are amazing
Yeah.
and probably should be paid more than that. But I think that should be like that sort of alarm bell to think, okay, do most senior pastors, do we require more time, expertise, education, responsibility, being on call, like that? Like, I think that the responsibility level, the the resume that we're looking for a senior pastor is probably way more in depth than an elementary school teacher, but
Yeah.
yet we're paying them essentially the same.
And not to
So that's a
mention
problem.
not to mention that your senior pastor is working 12 months out of the year, where your elementary teacher is working 10. I mean, that's something a lot of people, when it comes to teachers, they don't even consider that part,
Right.
And so that is, I mean, it's a little bit more for the senior pastor, the exact of the report, but when you take these other things you're talking about in consideration, it just doesn't seem fair.
Yeah. I think a pastor's job is probably more aligned with, you talk about level of responsibility with maybe like a school administrator or
Mm-hmm.
a mid-level manager of a large
Mm-hmm.
corporation. Their salaries are significantly higher. And I put them in that report.
Yep.
64,000 for a school administrator, 75,000 for mid-level manager. So I just think there's a big gap there in the responsibility and value we're looking for in the position, and what the pay commands. Again, is this like the point behind this research was not to be like, oh, so pastors can just say, oh, woe is me. Isn't it just so terrible for us pastors? We don't make a lot of money. Because again, it's not about the money, but here's my issue with all of this. It's a two-way street, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, pastors should be, if that's what God's called them to do, and they have a heart to help people and teach and preach the gospel, then great. They should be willing to do that, even if the money is not great. But who is controlling the other side of that equation? Who is setting those levels? It's churches. It's whether it's at a denominational level or at a local congregation level, it's up to the people as far as how much they're going to be paid. Now, if it's a really small congregation and the giving is pretty minimal, I get it. Like not every pastor is in a position where the church can pay them, and many are bivocational, co-vocational, and that's wonderful. So I'm not really speaking to that necessarily. I'm more speaking to the more established ministries that have the financial means to do something, but are not. And generosity is a two-way street. If we want the pastor to say, hey, give of your attention and your life and your energy to help and minister to us, but yet we're not going to be willing to really pay you in line with what we're asking you to do. And I think that's the disconnect here.
Yeah.
And so part of the findings of this survey are not just, okay, there's a struggle on the pastoral side, but there's an education, a knowledge gap on the part of many churches to say, hey, maybe $50,000 was great 15 years ago, because that's what you made at your job 15 years ago. But have you tried living on that in your area today? Like, for a family with 3 kids, like, is that going to do it? Probably not. So, I mean, that's part of it. It's not just the pastor side; it's also the church side as well.
Yeah, and it's like we said, this doesn't seem to be particularly specific to a type of church or denomination of church or anything. Like this is pretty by and large like just that mindset of ministry. Like I said, I love the term. I keep jumping back to the term. You've I don't know if you developed it or stole it from somewhere, but this poverty theology idea that
I trademarked that. That's mine.
Yeah, TM. And so I have to pay a quarter every time I say it. But I mean, this is just this idea that, again, even if it's not explicitly taught, it's subliminally understood, not just in the minds of ministry leaders and church leaders, but even in the congregations, unfortunately. And, I keep bringing back this contrast to those who are caught up in the opposite side of the spectrum with the prosperity gospel. And like, I'm a capitalist. I'm a big fan of like, hey, if you find success financially and you earn it, like great. But there is something to be said, at least to take note of, or maybe it's a red flag when you do see someone who is supposedly giving their life to the full-time ministry in the church, and they seem to be like in the top 1% in terms of, their wealth and their success in that way. If nothing else, it's something to take note of, as far as that. And I mean, again, I don't want to necessarily chase that rabbit, but it often doesn't. It kind of hurts because that's the example that, we'll use. We'll say, well, we don't want our pastor, if you're serving the Lord, you don't need to be driving Ferraris and living in mansions. And okay, maybe I understand the idea that like, maybe you should steward God's resources that you're given to be a little bit more mission focused than, materialism focused. But all that to say, it's a you've said it. It's a mindset. It's a mindset that both the church leaders and really most of the congregations have. And so I'm going to kind of use that to transition into the second challenge you highlight here, which I think we've already again started to touch on, is this lack of educational resources, in that, most of the pastors, they've received little to no financial education as part of their, ministry training. And again, being someone who went through, I mean, you and I went to Bible college, did the ministry training thing. I remember one class on finances. It was just, basic church. It's basically an accounting class, retitled and structured to kind of fit the, hey, here's how it works at churches. And, it was good. It was helpful, but it's all that was offered. And so, there's this lack of educational
Did it cover any
resources.
personal finances?
Yeah, I remember it was, they talked about setting a personal budget, kind of like Dave Ramsey 101 type stuff. But I remember and I don't remember much about the class if I'm honest. But I don't remember much talk about retirement and investment. I think it was touched on, but, it was really, but what they focused on was, budgeting, because that was the idea was, hey, you're going to be in ministry. You're not going to be like making a lot of money. So you need to live on a budget so that you can survive. And so, that by and large, again, a lack of educational resources when it comes to your financial understanding finances and everything, because Nate, again, it wasn't until I really got introduced to you that I started to even grasp what investing and kind of, long-term financial planning and preparation was. And so anyways, I'll let you kind of dive into what you've got here for the second challenge.
Yeah, when I asked that question in the survey, only 10% of respondents, people that responded,
those guys,
I don't know what the right word is, said that they were taught about personal finances as part of their ministry training and that it was helpful for them. Some said that they think it was touched on, but like you, it was not anything that they actually benefited from. And most said they did not receive any training. So there's a big gap there. And I think that probably is part of the solution, is going right back to the source and at the jump, helping pastors to be equipped in their personal finances to understand just things like Social Security and Medicare tax, opting out of Social Security, and why I think that's actually a really bad idea. Understanding their own retirement savings, how retirement savings works, understanding some of the unique implications that using a church 403b brings. And then on top of that, budgeting and tracking spending and health insurance. And I think there's just a lot of like basic touch points that it's like, this is real life. Remember, like for high school, that was always the complaint. Well, how is this going to help me in real life? Like algebra or whatever the class is. And some of those, sometimes it was just, whiny teenagers just not wanting to be in class.
Yeah.
But there is a validity to saying, hey, what are we teaching young people that's going to prepare them for real life? Is it all just kind of theoretical and fluff and things that are like, okay, that's great, I suppose, to expand your knowledge, but you're not going to really use this?
Yeah.
And I taught a consumer math class to high school students. I think that was one of the best classes I ever taught. It was on a difficulty level a lot easier. Like what had happened was it was for seniors, and either seniors could opt for whether I don't remember, it was calculus or trigonometry, but it was an honors class. Or if they didn't want to take the honors class, they could take consumer math, which I hate that it had to be a choice. Right?
Yeah.
I wish that the students could do both. I wish that they could take honors classes and be able to graduate with honors and get this consumer math class, because we talked about all the things that are just real life. So I think that's a big gap in that equation. A lot of pastors just don't know. So I was asking them, where do you go? Like, what sources do you use for financial education? And it was just all over the map. Like some guys look stuff up on YouTube. Some guys read books. Some guys will just talk to their friends. Some will have maybe a family member that they feel is like financially savvy. Some have a financial advisor. Like it's just, literally Google search. Like there's just so many places to go and find answers. And it's great if one of those happens to be a good resource, but how do you know? Like, if you've never received any training on it, you're like, I want to start a retirement account. I want to make sure my family's taken care of if something happens to me. I want to find a side source of income. Like, I just have these financial questions. Usually they're just typing it into Google, or they're just, they're sitting at lunch with their brother-in-law and like, hey, so, what do you guys do for retirement? And so maybe they're getting good info. I find a lot of times they're really not finding the best info, because they're just grabbing whatever random source. And then on top of that, so you go on YouTube and you watch a video and you're like, well, that guy sounded smart. I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's good, so maybe I should do that. But then you go and you hear somebody else say, never listen to that person. No, they don't know anything. Oh, you should always do this. So it's just very confusing. So even guys that they're like, okay, I know I know what I don't know,
Yeah.
but I just don't even know where to start. How do I
Yeah.
even begin this? And then here's the
Yeah.
other thing, Luke, that just really that's part of this collateral damage of not having education around it is pastors are constantly getting questions and people are seeking out counsel from them as their pastor. Hey, we're really struggling in our marriage right now. It's like this contention, like money is like real,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
we're always fighting about it. Or, I want to be a giver. I'm just really not sure how to like get out of debt here. And then pastors kind of feel like, well, I'm not qualified. How can I
Yeah.
talk to you about finances when I'm not really even sure what I'm doing here?
Hmm.
And not that pastors, by the way, I definitely don't think if you're a pastor that you should be the financial counselor unless that literally is part of your
Yeah.
background and training.
Yeah.
But it underscores your own sort of lack of knowledge,
Mm.
and I just found that to come up over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think lest somebody out there who's thinks that we're dogging on Bible colleges and seminaries and places that train pastors in particular. I think in general, going back to what you were saying about the consumer math class that you taught and the fact that it had to be a choice, and I don't want to turn this into a too broad of a discussion, but in a way, it's kind of just a failure of, I guess, education in general. Because I remember having the same kind of choice presented to me even when I was in high school. It was, you can take this practical math class that's probably really going to help you, or you can take the more advanced track. And of course, we're being pushed to the advanced track because that helps us technically score higher on the ACT, makes the school look better and increases your chance in college and all that stuff. Now, I, just being a lazy high school student, refused to take that track. And I didn't care about the honor stuff. And honestly, even though the choice for me at the time was being made, like I said, out of just kind of like being an awful student and not wanting to apply myself, I'm actually really glad I did go that route, because looking back on it now, it's like, learning advanced math calculus would have done me no good. There is literally not a skill set that I've had to use that requires that knowledge. But because I took the more practical math kind of route, oh yeah, I mean, I use that almost daily, in my own, personal finances and running a business and things like that. And so again, like I said, unless somebody's out there is like, well, they really are hating on Bible colleges. No, this is just kind of an educational problem in
Right.
general. And again, for me, one of the best things that I was grateful for in high school was that they did put us through about a 9-week course of and everybody did have to do this. Every student there, this was just required as part of a social studies class. We all had to go through the Dave Ramsey's, version of basically Financial Peace University, but made for high schools. And again, that is where I would credit most of my foundational knowledge about finances came from there. And so all that to say, this education it's really, it's unfortunately not just among pastors, it's amongst most people. That's why, the numbers for consumer debt out there are wild, and how little people actually have in their savings and how little people are actually investing and how many people are actually living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, those stats are pretty staggering. And so, this challenge of educational, not having education, it's very real amongst, and again, I think going back to, what we were saying earlier about how I don't think it's just the pastors. I think it's also the people. The people don't necessarily understand. And so I think that kind of drifts us into this third challenge, is this communication gap that's happening in churches amongst a pastor. I can't imagine being a pastor who has to stand up and talk about giving, because it seems so self-serving. Hey, you need to give so I can pay myself and pay myself, a decent wage so I can live. And so, let's unless there's something I skipped there in that second challenge, let's drift into the challenge number 3 here.
Right. So pastors a lot of times can see the problem. They can see that they're underpaid. They can see that people need to be more generous in their giving. The average giving in the US, I've looked at different reports, it's about 3% for Christians. So
Mm-hmm.
of self-proclaimed Christians, their giving rate's about 3%. Now, we can get into the, is tithing for New Testament or is it grace giving? But I mean, even if you don't believe in tithing, I hope that your grace giving leads you to give more than 3%
Yeah.
of your,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I think we can all agree that that's lower than it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the pastors see that, they see the need, but then they feel like anytime I want to talk about it, it does seem self-serving. It seems like, okay, right, of course, pastor, of course you want the giving to increase. That would help you out. That would help the church out. That would, like, and also when it comes to their own personal compensation, like what if the pastor's like, listen, I'm struggling right now. I'm trying to make ends meet. You want me to work full time. I can't make it on this full time. I either need to get a pay raise or I need to decrease the number of hours I'm giving to the church and get a side job
Mm-hmm.
because this ain't going to work. And a lot of pastors drop out of ministry for a variety of reasons. One of the biggest being finances. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen it many times. I think most people that are in ministry, they know of several people to where it just got to the point where a guy felt like, it's me, it's my ministry or my family here. I can't do both. I can't actually serve the church and be a father and be a husband and fulfill all my roles if I'm only going to be paid this. It's just not
Yeah.
going to work. I have to, it's a fork in the road moment and I choose family,
Yeah.
which, by the way, I think is the right choice. Like
Absolutely.
if that's literally the choice you have to make, choose your family every time. But I don't feel like it always has to be that choice. And this is where that communication comes in. So pastors, I feel like they need to be emboldened, encouraged to say, listen, it is not wrong to have honest conversations with your church leadership about what fair compensation looks like. It is the responsibility of you to serve your church to the best of your ability. It is their responsibility as the church to the best of their ability, take care of those who serve them. And the Bible speaks to this, and there's several different passages we could go to that talk about the worthiness of, the laborer is worthy of his reward. Like when you serve the church in a ministry capacity, when you serve the church spiritually, the church should serve you in helping meet your physical needs.
Yeah.
And I don't know that a lot of pastors have had those honest conversations. And so one of the tools that I've been able to use that have helped pastors is doing a salary report.
Mm-hmm.
Churchsalary.com is a huge database of information on compensation across the board in the country. And it's a really in-depth, like robust report. That's been very helpful. I've done dozens of those reports for pastors. Either they're going into a new ministry and they just want to kind of know like, hey, what should this look like? I'm not going to try to come in and be like, play hardball, Mr. Negotiator. Let's see how big of a salary I can get. But they're like, I do literally want to make sure that I'm taking care of my family's needs and being paid reasonably. Or maybe in their current ministry, they know that they're coming up on a season where that needs to be reevaluated and they want to kind of make sure that they're not off base. Because, if you don't have hard data to back it up, it can be one thing to be like, well, church, I think I need to be paid $100,000 a year because I talked to such and such guy over at this company. And that's how much he makes. Well, I definitely know I work just as hard as he does, so that's what you should pay me.
Yeah.
Like that's not a very good basis for a salary recommendation. But having those tools and having that data can really help and kind of eliminate a little bit more of the subjectivity behind those conversations and just say, hey, here's the reality.
Yeah.
I'm not off base on this.
Yeah.
And by the way, Luke, if anybody
Yep.
listening wants a salary report, I'm happy to provide that for them.
Yeah.
I've done that for people and you just get a hold of me and I'm glad to do that for you too.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're going to make sure that people know how to access, your, not just this report, but be able to get in touch with you, make sure. And I know you're like, we can just throw your website out there for sure. Maybe for those that are listening that are too lazy to access the show notes, that's typically me. So NateSkelly.com is your website. So that's how, if you did want to reach out to Nate and generate this report or just ask questions, how you could there. And yeah, Nate, with that in mind, we started the conversation, and obviously you aren't just talking from a position of just hey, I like to talk about money. You are a certified financial planner, financial advisor, and you've been doing this for how many years? You've been at this now, like 5 or 6 years,
I've been
something
in
like that.
Finance for 6 years, financial pathway for the last 3, like my own business.
Yes. Great. So, and I can't, recommend Nate enough for, I always put this disclosure out there. You are my financial advisor. And again, if it weren't for our us getting connected in that way, I don't know what I'd be doing in terms of planning long term. And so I highly recommend Nate. But yeah, I mean, you've got this kind of final section here about financial advisors, and I just want to kind of hit that. I don't want to overlook that because we've given a lot of these challenges, kind of presented some problems. Okay, well, this is a potential solution, or to get you on a path to a solution to solving these problems, overcoming these obstacles. So, let's talk a little bit about kind of financial advisors in general, and then even how you take that approach to what you do.
Yeah, I think a lot of pastors, when they realize all of those things that we were talking about, it leads a lot of them to want to seek out a financial advisor, but that creates its own challenge.
Yeah.
Because there's really two obstacles there. Number one, the biggest one is trust. And Luke, I'll tell you, man, like, it's really tough for me because I see this play out sometimes. I never want to be the person that tries to generate business by bashing the competition. I feel like that's
absolutely.
in bad form. And I feel like that's actually should be a huge red flag. If their whole pitch to you is everybody else bad, me good, then that tells you more about that person.
Yeah.
So I've never tried to take that approach of like, listen, guys, there's a lot of bad financial advisors out there. Let me tell you how bad they are. You need to work with me. But I also do feel that I have a responsibility, a duty to try to help people understand what the landscape of financial advice looks like. The term financial advisor, I love it and I hate it. I love it in its pure raw form because that is what I do. I give financial advice, but I hate it because of the connotation that it's brought on, which is basically salesperson, which is not undeserved, because I would say most people that use the term financial advisor are really just in sales. They are trying to sell life insurance or sell annuities, or they are just trying to sell you on opening up an account and putting your money in something and just really never ever talking to you again. And that happens all the time. And I hate it because what people are looking for is they're looking for counsel. They're looking for somebody to help them align the use of their money with what is really important to them. And what they're getting is a sales pitch for a financial product. So just like anything else, their financial products are fine in their place. They're useful tools in the right circumstances, but we can't lead with a tool. Like if you're coming into a conversation already saying whatever problem you're about to tell me about, this is going to be the solution. Then that's sales. You're selling something. You're not giving advice. You're not giving counsel. So so trust is a big obstacle, and understandably so. And I think for pastors, when they're looking for a financial advisor, some things that may be able to help are understanding, first of all, how does somebody get paid? Okay. Let's get real clear here. How do you get paid? All the ways you get paid. And if somebody gives you a vague answer like, well, you don't pay me, the insurance company pays me. That should, like, if people have to be vague and sort of dismissive about how they get paid, that should be a red flag. What are you going to do for me? Like, what will this relationship look like? What kind of questions can I ask you? What kind of things will you give me advice on? What are your qualifications or expertise? Who do you work with? What does a typical client of yours look like? Like certain designations that may speak to a level of competence, that sort of thing. But I think those types of questions are really, really important to get down to that baseline level of trust to say, okay, is this worth it? And then the second one, very closely tied to it, is price. So the difficulty here is some advisors who are very, very proficient, very knowledgeable, very skilled, and really know their stuff only work with a very high tier of clientele, and they have certain minimums. Like, unless you have $1 million to invest, I'm just not for you. And it may not be that high, but they may have certain minimums, certain requirements, or maybe they're paid directly. Maybe you pay a yearly fee. Maybe it's $3,000 a year, $5,000 a year, or something along those lines. Well, that's going to naturally price out a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of very competent advisors who are just not accessible to most pastors. And then you have a lot of so-called advisors who work with anybody because their products are such that as long as somebody buys it, they're still going to make a decent amount of money. Their commission's still going to be okay. And so a lot of times, because the best advisors or some of the highest end advisors are unreachable, what's left over in many cases are the people that aren't really going to help you in the way that you want to be.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't say all that to say, so guys, the only solution is me, Nate Skelly, Financial Pathway. That's your only chance in this world. Because I know a lot of really good Christian guys who understand pastors and pastoral finances and are doing a great job and work with people, and that's great. As long as you're finding people like that, I am like, yes, good for you, truly. But it really does break my heart sometimes. And I feel like saying things and I don't, but I just think them inside when I see when I just see some of the stuff out there that's just so misleading and not actually helpful when it comes to the space of financial advice.
Yeah, there's a couple of, kind of these professions, if you will, or titles, designations that I've always heard, like, just because they have that title doesn't mean they are qualified or good at it. One of them is a real estate agent. Just because someone has a real estate license doesn't mean that they're going to be able to be the best option for selling or buying a home. And then financial advisors, just because, they are a financial advisor or even have some type of certification does not necessarily mean that they are qualified and going to be your best option. And something that I've heard before is and this is what you are, Nate, is someone who just is going to teach you. And Nate, you just seem to be more passionate about the educational side of it. Like, hey, I want to teach you. Like, I remember when I first connected with you, when you started doing this, we sat down for a meeting and, we just laid out all my finances. And at the time I had just started my business within the past couple of years. And I remember you told me, you said, hey, probably the best investment you can make right now is into your own business. And so, you need to consider retirement. Here's the value of that. But if you did invest a lot back into your business right now, you're in a good season to do that. And that did not necessarily serve you in that it didn't put quite as much, if you will, into the investment accounts you were managing for me. But you gave me that honest advice and I followed it, and I'm glad I did. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, yep, I'm still investing in my own business, but I also have more to invest into the retirement and the investment accounts and the long-term investment in that way. And so, Nate, you're great about, you have a very humble approach, but, and you can just pay me, the amount we disclosed beforehand for me to sing your praises here. But in all seriousness,
I'll read off a real fast disclosure at the end of the podcast.
Yes. Yes. No, but seriously, you didn't put me up to this, but I have been really pleased with your approach. And I know a lot of other people and pastors, church leaders in particular have. I want to talk about this too, Nate. You offered this as a, kind of a one-to-one advisory type of service. But I do like to talk a little bit about what you do for churches in terms of, kind of the ministry you offer, not just to pastors, but to the people to help educate them with the financial, weekends and, kind of programs that you offer there, which, by the way, you're going to Eastside Baptist in Thomasville in a couple months, right? Yeah, I do their design. And so, they sent me a design request the other day with your face attached to it and said, hey, he's coming, make me a graphic. So I was like, but yeah, so you're doing stuff like that.
Yeah, as of the recording of this, on Sunday, I will be with our friends Andrew Browning and Justin Farmer in
Oh,
Connecticut.
up in
So
Connecticut.
it's cool to actually, as part of this, go and see some friends and folks that haven't. It's just been a while since I've seen them in person. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll just say a quick word on this, Luke. Like when I started Financial Pathway, a big reason I wanted to go start my own business is I wanted to have the flexibility and freedom to be able to have this ministry, which that's what
Mm-hmm.
it is. It's the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to churches, spend a weekend, I call it a financial health weekend, and just spend some time on Sunday teaching and preaching about what the Bible says about money and wealth and understanding the principles. And then also taking some time to do a practical session or two and helping people understand, okay, let's start to take those principles and let's talk about how you actually live that out. How do you start making smart money decisions that align with your values and get you closer to where you want to be? And there goes my microphone. So,
It's all good.
and
Just throw it out.
and so that, I mean, that's been great. I don't do that full time, but I probably once a month I'll go, on average, I'll go to a church and do something like that. And it's just been awesome. And yeah, I think trying to find different avenues, whether it's working with somebody one-on-one, whether it's going to a church and spending a weekend, doing a podcast. I'm just trying to look for every avenue I can to promote financial health, to promote a biblical worldview of money and finances for as many people as possible. And I love it. Like it's been an amazing thing. It's not been easy, as I think we've talked about before, just in private conversations. Anytime you start a business, we've kind of been in that same season of like it's a grind, especially at first. But what it opens up and the freedom and opportunities that it gives you is just incredible. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm with you there on that, just that kind of entrepreneurial journey in general. Like it's sometimes it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's the most rewarding. And, I always say I would have to be in just dire, desperate straits for like needing, to provide for my family for me to quit doing what I do, because the flexibility it provides and just getting to do what you love to do every day, making your own job is awesome. So yeah, a little plug for that there. But yeah, again, I can't recommend your stuff enough, Nate. Again, like I said, your services as far as being an advisor, and then what you offer to, like I said, on these churches as a ministry to come in and teach about that. And yeah, you mentioned your podcast. I do. I genuinely, I'm subscribed to the podcast. I don't think I've missed an episode. You're putting out content every couple weeks. And then also the last resource I know is your Money Minute that you send out every month. That just we're recording this on March 1st, so I just read the February one yesterday, and it's always really interesting. You just send it once a month. It's got a little recap of just some interesting articles and kind of data that you found. And so again, I think you can just get to all of this by going to nateskelly.com. And yeah, but hey, Nate, this has been a really great conversation. It always is. Is there any kind of closing thoughts, words, anything you want to share with the audience out there?
No, I mean, I always love being on the podcast, Luke. Thanks again for the invitation. Yeah, if I can help anybody in any way, any of those avenues, I'm glad to do it. And just always enjoy coming on and having a good conversation with you.
Yeah. Well, we will make sure that, I mean, I'm going to go back and check the records. I'm going to see, like, I'm pretty sure you were on last year, but we're going to definitely, we're going to make sure that, we get you back on here, maybe in the next, I don't know, 6 to 12 months. I'll make that, I'm making that, everybody, I'm not going to edit that out. Everybody, I'm making that commitment. So,
I'm going to hold you to it.
If a few months from now, you're like, hey, you haven't had him back on, reach out, call me out on that. But yeah, it is always a good conversation. And again, can't recommend what you offer enough. So yeah, Nate, thanks for joining us. And we'll have you back on the podcast again soon.
Thanks again.